He stepped into his car, expecting silence. But a little girl's voice cut through the air. "Shut up." What began as a jarring encounter would unravel into a fight for a dying mother's life, past debt he never knew he owed, and a choice that could change all three of their futures forever. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The boardroom still echoed in Daniel Cross's mind like a storm that refused to clear. The long mahogany table, the clicking pens, the sharp glances traded between directors, every image lingered as he exited the towering glass building of Cross Enterprises. At 36, he had perfected the art of hiding the exhaustion behind his chauffeured black sedan. His jaw tightened. "Take me home," he told Marcus, his driver, loosening his tie just enough to breathe. The car purred to life, gliding away from the curb, city lights spilling across the tinted windows in streaks of gold and blue. He leaned back, allowing himself a rare moment of silence. That's when he heard it. "Shut up." The words were small but sharp, like a pebble flung against glass. Daniel's head snapped toward the sound, his brows knitting. The voice had come from the far corner of the back seat, where there should have been nothing but leather upholstery. His gaze landed on a girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her hair was a tangle of chestnut strands that looked like they'd been brushed in a hurry, or not at all, and her wide hazel eyes stared at him with a defiance that seemed far too old for her age. A worn teddy bear was tucked under her arm, its fur matted from years of clutching. Daniel's first instinct was irritation. "What the hell?" Mark asked. Marcus flinched in the driver's seat, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. "Sir, I didn't realize she was there." Daniel's voice hardened. "Didn't realize? How does a child end up in my car without you noticing?" Marcus's ears burned red as he fumbled for an explanation. "I was parked outside the grocery store, waiting for you, after the meeting, sir. She must have slipped in while I was checking the side mirror. There was a crowd, people unloading carts, kids running around. I swear, I didn't see her until now." The girl hugged her teddy closer but didn't look away. "You were talking too loud," she said matter-of-factly, her voice carrying that same strange firmness. "My mom's sick, and I'm thinking—" Daniel blinked at her. He wasn't sure which part caught him off guard more, the fact that a stranger's child was in his car, or that she just reprimanded him like a tired teacher to a noisy class. "Thinking," he repeated slowly, "in my car." She nodded. "It's quiet here." Well, it was. Something about her tone, calm, certain, almost adult, made him hesitate. Normally, he would have had Marcus pull over immediately and hand the child to the nearest security guard, but instead, he found himself studying her. Her knees were drawn up, sneakers scuffed, and one shoelace untied. The teddy bear had a missing button eye. She was thin in that way that suggested more skipped meals than growth spurts, yet her posture was upright, chin lifted, gaze steady. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, as if debating whether to tell him. "Emma," she finally said. "Emma Lane." "Well, Emma Lane," Daniel replied, his voice dry, "this is not a playground. Or a taxi. What exactly are you doing here?" Emma's fingers smoothed the teddy bear's worn ear. "Like I said, I'm thinking. I have to figure out how to help my mom." He arched a brow. "And that involves breaking into a stranger's car?" "You weren't a stranger," she said simply. "I heard you talking on the phone outside the store. You sounded like someone who could fix things." Daniel's throat tightened, not because of her words, but because of the way she'd said them. Not begging, not pleading, just stating a fact, as though she'd already decided he was her answer. Marcus cleared his throat. "Sir, should I—" "Years ago," Daniel interrupted, surprising himself. "Not yet." Emma's gaze flicked between them, cautious but unwavering. Daniel leaned back, studying her more closely. "Your mom's sick?" She nodded once, the smallest motion, but her lips pressed into a thin line like she was holding the rest back. She's tired all the time, gets dizzy. The doctor says it's her blood. She needs medicine, but it's expensive. The last word seemed to cost her something. She said it the way adults did when the weight of bills pressed on their shoulders. Daniel exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure why he was still letting this conversation happen. He had contracts to review, calls to make, an evening lined up that didn't involve unraveling the mystery of a defiant little girl and her sick mother. Yet here she was, sitting in his car as if she belonged. "You should be with her," he said. "Not here." "Will be," Emma replied, "but I needed a minute to think, without the TV on or people knocking on the door. You have quiet. In nice seats." For the first time, Daniel felt a corner of his mouth twitch. He covered it with a cough. "Nice seats," he repeated. Marcus glanced at him in the mirror, clearly unsure whether to laugh or apologize again. Daniel's phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He ignored it. His attention was fixed on Emma, on the odd steadiness in her tone, the absence of fear despite sitting inches away from a stranger in a suit. She was either incredibly brave or dangerously naive. "You know," he said carefully, "most people would be scared in this situation." Emma tilted her head. "Should I be?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was, he didn't want to scare her, but he also wasn't used to being challenged so directly. He said at last, "Not today." For a moment, silence filled the car again, broken only by the hum of the engine and the muted sounds of the city outside. Emma leaned her head against the window, watching the streetlights slide past. "You remind me of someone in my mom's old stories," she said softly. Daniel frowned. "Stories?" "She used to tell me about a man who helped her once, a long time ago. She said he was impossible, but he kept his word." There was something in her tone, an echo of nostalgia that didn't belong to a child. It stirred an odd flicker of recognition in him, though he couldn't place why. Before he could ask more, the car slowed at a red light. Daniel glanced at Marcus. "Where's her mother?" "I didn't ask," Marcus admitted quickly. "She just appeared, sir." Daniel turned back to Emma. "Where does your mom live?" Emma hesitated, then gave an address that Daniel recognized as being in the older part of town, an area filled with narrow streets and aging apartment buildings, far from the manicured suburbs or gleaming condos he was used to. He tapped his finger on the armrest, weighing his options. Common sense told him to have Marcus drive straight there, drive her off, and be done with it. But something about the girl, her composure, her choice of words, the way she'd slipped into his car like it was the most natural thing in the world, kept him from ending it that easily. "Right," he said finally. "We'll take you home, but you'll answer my questions on the way." Emma gave a small shrug, as if she'd expected nothing less. "Fine, but no shouting." He almost laughed. Almost. As the light turned green and the car rolled forward, Daniel felt the strangest sensation, like the course of his evening had shifted entirely, and he wasn't the one in control anymore. And though he didn't know it yet, Emma Lane wasn't just an unexpected passenger. She was the key to a past he thought he'd left behind, and to a choice that would change everything. The car eased onto a quieter street, leaving the congested city center behind. Daniel leaned slightly forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze locked on the small figure sitting opposite him. "Start from the beginning," he said, his tone measured. "How exactly did you end up in my car?" Emma tapped the side of her teddy's head thoughtfully, as if considering the right words. "I was walking home from the store. Mom gave me a list, but halfway there I realized I forgot her medicine money on the counter. When I saw your car, I thought I could just sit for a minute, think about what to do. It looked safe." Daniel's brow lifted. "You think climbing into a stranger's car is safe?" Her hazel eyes met his without flinching. "It looked safe. You looked like you wouldn't hurt me." He wasn't sure whether to feel insulted or oddly trusted. "You've got a dangerous level of confidence in your instincts." Emma's small shoulders lifted in a faint shrug. "Sometimes you just know." Marcus' voice came carefully from the driver's seat. "Sir, we're about 15 minutes from the address she gave." Tamiel nodded, but didn't take his eyes off Emma. "What about your mother? Won't she be worried?" "Probably thinks I'm still at the store," Emma admitted. "Or maybe she's asleep. She sleeps a lot when she's not feeling good." Her voice dipped slightly, a shadow passing over her expression, but she quickly masked it by adjusting the teddy bear's crooked head. And you could hear the faint hum of the tires on the road, the occasional streetlight flickering through the windows. Something about this girl made the air in the car feel different, less predictable, more fragile. "You said she's sick," he pressed. "What exactly is wrong?" Eva hesitated, her lips pressing together as if she wasn't sure how much to share. "The doctor says her blood is low, and something about iron. She gets dizzy and weak, and her skin looks pale. Sometimes she almost falls when she's walking." Daniel processed this, mentally connecting the dots. Iron deficiency, possibly anemia. Treatable, but the mention of expensive medicine lingered in his mind. "Does she have anyone helping her?" he asked. Emma said quickly, "It's just us. I help her when she needs it." She straightened slightly, her tone almost proud. "I can cook noodles by myself." Daniel fought the urge to sigh. She shouldn't have to be cooking anything, certainly not caring for her mother in that way, at her age. They passed a row of dimly lit shops, the kind with peeling paint and faded signs. Daniel's eyes returned to her small figure in the seat. She wasn't fidgeting the way most children would in an unfamiliar place. She sat still, looking out the window occasionally, then back at him, as if silently weighing him as much as he was weighing her. "What did you mean earlier?" he asked. "When you said I sounded like someone who could fix things?" Emma blinked, then gave a small smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "When you were outside the store, you were on the phone. You told someone, 'There's no problem I can't solve if I put my mind to it.'" Daniel vaguely remembered saying it. It had been to one of his department heads, probably about a shipping delay. But hearing it repeated back in that small, hitty voice felt different. She sighed, her eyes darkening with concern. Her gaze didn't waver. "Maybe." He leaned back, the leather creaking softly beneath him. "And what if I can't?" "Then I'll find someone else who can," she said, the words carrying no malice, just certainty. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Marcus turned down another street, the buildings growing older, windows smaller, and the glow from street lamps casting long shadows. Daniel could see the way Emma's eyes flickered toward familiar landmarks. She was close to home. "You shouldn't have to be thinking about these things," he said, his voice lower now, "not at your age." Emma hugged her teddy tighter. "Maybe, but if I don't, who will?" It was the kind of answer that stayed with a person, and Daniel knew it would linger in his thoughts long after tonight. The car slowed as Marcus checked the address. "Almost there, sir." Daniel glanced out the window at the narrow street they were turning onto. The buildings were worn, some with bricks showing through cracked plaster. Laundry hung from rusted balconies, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. He looked back at Emma. "When we get there, I want to meet your mother." Emma's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe even a flicker of suspicion. But she didn't object. "Okay, but don't tell her I was in your car. She'd be mad." He tilted his head. "Mad? She doesn't like me talking to strangers, and she doesn't trust men in suits." Daniel almost smiled at the irony. "I'll keep that in mind." They pulled up in front of a narrow, three-story building with chipped paint and dim stairwell lights that flickered like they were on their last day of life. Daniel opened his door, stepping out into the cool evening air. Emma followed, clutching her teddy, and glanced up at him as if expecting him to change his mind. Instead, he gestured toward the entrance. "Lead the way." Marcus stayed by the car as Daniel followed Emma up a short flight of uneven steps and through a creaking door. The hallway smelled faintly of old wood and detergent. Emma paused at a door on the second floor, her hand hovering over the knob. She turned to him, her voice suddenly quieter. "She's probably sleeping. Don't wake her up too much." Daniel gave a small nod. Emma pushed the door open, and the sight inside was a stark contrast to the cold city streets. The apartment was tiny but neat. A threadbare couch sat near a low coffee table stacked with neatly folded laundry. In the corner, a small shelf held an assortment of children's books, some missing covers. From a partially open bedroom door, a soft cough sounded. Emma set her teddy down gently on the couch and disappeared into the bedroom. Daniel stayed in the living room, glancing around, his eyes catching on a framed photograph on the wall. Emma, younger, sitting in a woman's lap. The woman had the same hazel eyes and a warm, tired smile. The cough came again, followed by a faint voice. "Emma? You're back?" Emma's reply was soft but steady. "Yeah, Mom, I brought someone who might be able to help." Daniel's brows lifted slightly. She hadn't exactly followed her own warning about keeping his presence a secret. He stepped toward the bedroom doorway, unsure of what kind of reception he would get. And, though he didn't yet realize it, this first meeting, with a sick mother and a determined little girl, was the beginning of a chain of events that would upend the careful order of his life and force him to face questions he hadn't asked himself in years. Rain stitched silver lines across the sedan's windows, while the city slid by in blurs of neon and brick, and Daniel, for once, kept his voice low. He was a man who filled silence with plans and pressure, but the little girl across from him had pressed a finger to her lips and said he was too loud, and something about the steadiness in those small eyes made him listen. Emma sat buckled at the far end of the leather bench, chin up, shoes not quite reaching the floor. Her sneakers were clean but rubbed thin at the heels. Her sweater sleeves had been stretched and reshrunk until they forgot their original size. A well-loved teddy bear rode in the crook of her arm, its stitched smile a little crooked, its fur patched in places with thread that did not quite match. She watched the rain like it was. "How long has your mom been gone?" he asked, careful with the question, careful with the quiet. Emma's thumb smoothed a seam in the seat. "A long time," she said, and then, as if correcting the world, "but not forever." "Do you know where she went?" "Work," she answered. "Sometimes work is far away." In a mirror, the chauffeur risked a glance back, worry and apology pulling at his mouth. Daniel set his phone in his lap, the emergency screen open, his thumb hovering over the bright numbers. "I need to let someone know you're safe," he said. "The police can help us find your mom faster than I can." Emma's eyes widened. Not wild, not defiant, but old in a way that felt wrong on a 7-year-old. "Don't separate us," she whispered. "They did that to Kayla," she said. "The sheets smelled like bleach and not like Mom." She hugged the teddy closer. "Please don't call yet, please." The plea slid under Daniel's ribs. Years ago, a younger sister had asked him for help in a voice like that. He'd been too busy to hear it in time. The memory had a way of finding him on rainy days, when the city seemed crowded with versions of himself who might have done better. "Right," he said, surprising even himself. "Not yet." He drew a breath, gentled his tone. "But we can't drive forever. Where should we go?" She gave an address, hesitant, like someone who knew the map but was never certain she was allowed to name a place. It pulled them east, toward a run of narrow streets, where porches leaned and grocery bags doubled as umbrellas. He nodded to the chauffeur. The sedan eased into a turn. The tires hissed over a boulevard that had been shiny with rain since morning. "You were talking too loud," she said after a while, as if repeating the weather. The car, the phone. Before, she tipped the teddy's head, as if letting it listen too. "You said someone cost you millions. That's too heavy to carry in a car. It makes the air crowded." He nearly smiled. "You're not wrong." "How will you say shut up when it's too crowded?" she admitted, cheeks pink now. "I shouldn't have said it. Teddy says sometimes we use wrong words for right reasons." "What does Teddy say about seatbelts?" She checked the buckle promptly, clicked it with ceremony, and patted the strap. "He says yes." They let the quiet sit between them. Outside, church doors stood open to the damp. A line formed at a shelter with a crooked sign. Daniel studied Emma's shoes again, saw where the pattern had faded to a whisper. She sat like a child who had learned diplomacy early, streetwise and strangely polite. cautious and bold in quick turns, as if she were balancing on a thin rail between two worlds. "Does your mom know you're with me?" he asked. "She will." Emma's certainty sounded practiced, like a line from a play she'd decided to believe. "She says if it gets too loud, I should find a quiet car and make my brain tiny." She looked at him with frank approval. "Your car is very quiet." "Cars?" he asked. "Does cars go somewhere, even when people don't know where to go?" she said simply. It wasn't an answer that satisfied a CEO, but it made child logic sense. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, forced himself not to summon a security team yet. Not until he knew whether help would heal or harm. "Tell me about your mom," he tried instead. "I'd fix a zipper with a fork," Emma said, pride lifting her voice. "She makes soup that tastes like hugs. She doesn't like thunder, but she pretends she does. And she says time is a coat that doesn't fit right now, but someday it will." "What's her name?" "Nora," she said softly, as if the name were a fragile thing. The sedan nosed into a narrower street where puddles had grown into plate-sized ponds. Row houses hunched shoulder to shoulder, paint peeling in long curls. "Here," Emma said, palm pressed to the glass. She pointed to a stoop with a bowed railing and a mailbox that leaned forward as if impatient. They stopped. Rain drummed on the hood. Daniel stepped out first and opened the door on Emma's side, umbrella pitched toward her like a portable sky. She slid out with Teddy, shoes skidding once before she found the wet concrete. For the first time she looked small, really small, under the weight of a building that had learned to expect disappointment. "It can go," she told the chauffeur with a tiny, bossy nod. Daniel shook his head. The man stayed, engine idling like a heartbeat. They climbed to the top step. Emma knocked a pattern, too quick, one slow, too quick. That sounded practiced. Silence, she knocked again, gentler, as though she could bruise the door with need. "You have a key?" Daniel asked. "Sometimes," she said. "Not today. I left it in the coat with the orange pockets." He tried the handle. Locked. An envelope sagged under a magnet on the tin mailbox. A red lane printed in block letters, a red past due stamp shouting through the rain. He slid it back before Emma could follow his gaze too far down that road. "'Cause I can wait here," she said, straightening. "If I come home first, I wait on the stairs, and I don't go inside with strangers." She held his eyes, measuring. "You're not a stranger now. You're a..." He could have given a speech about protocols and social workers and systems. Instead, he took in the rain, the thin awning, the way she gently pressed her hand to the wood as if to share warmth through it. Wisdom, he reminded himself, has to fit the weather. "We'll wait," he said, "together." They sat on the top step, the umbrella propped like a small roof. Water funneled from the gutter in silver ropes. From somewhere inside the building, a cough, a television's low murmur, a baby crying, and then soothed. Emma lifted Teddy's paw to wave at the rain, then asked, "Do you have a sister?" He blinked. "I do. How did you know?" "You look like you're listening to someone who isn't here," she said. "My mom does that when she cooks. She listens to my grandma in her head." He thought of his sister's voicemail he'd saved during the year they barely spoke, his half-apologies sent in overnight packages. He thought of the expensive gifts and the cheap repair that presents could have made and didn't. "I wasn't a very good brother for a while," he admitted. "I practice," she said with matter-of-fact mercy. "I practice not saying shut up." He laughed, small and real. The door remained closed, the rain softened to a whisper. "Emma," he tried, gentle, "if your mom doesn't come soon, we'll need to look for her in ways that don't separate you. I have people who can help without shouting." "Who?" Her hope and fear tangled around the one syllable. "And who work for me. They're good at finding. They'll knock soft." She considered this, thumb rubbing a shiny patch on Teddy's ear. "Okay," she said at last. Soft knocks. He texted 2 trusted names, writing sparely. A welfare check, a request for quiet, a description, an address. He put the phone away again and chose the old practice of being present. "Do your shoes always like that?" she asked after a while, eyeing his polished dress shoes with solemn judgment. They don't like puddles. You're snobs, he confessed. Your car is a snob too, she decided. But it's a kind snob. He could have asked her 100 adult questions, each one a net. He asked none of them. What's Teddy's job? He asked instead. Happy sequency. Is Teddy, she said, scandalized at the thought of additional roles. Then, magnanimously, sometimes he's Dr. Theodore when my mom is sick. Another door across the narrow courtyard opened and closed. Somewhere a dog barked twice. A bus sighed to a stop at the corner, and then exhaled its way back into the gray. Do you think your mom is okay? He asked, because not asking was another kind of cruelty. Emma didn't look away from the stairwell. I think she is trying very hard, she said. Trying is different than okay. But it's a kind of okay. He tightened his grip on the umbrella handle, then loosened it. Can I tell you a secret? He said. She examined him sidelong, weighing the offer. If it's a good one. I was loud today because I lost something that isn't money, he said. Someone who worked for me left because I pushed too hard. Sometimes I think pushing keeps things from falling apart. But people aren't things. She nodded, absorbing it like a lesson. You can practice that too. Well, he said, and meant it. They listened to the rain's last hushed applause. Footsteps pounded up from the lower landing. Quick, breathless. Emma bolted upright. Teddy clamped under her arm, hope breaking open on her face like light through cloud. Daniel angled the umbrella toward the bend in the stairs, already rising, already ready to meet whatever came next. Already a little different than he'd been an hour ago, where it mattered. Careful with the one small voice that had told him the air was too crowded, and taught him how to make space. The footsteps slowed as they reached the landing. A woman appeared, her thin frame wrapped in a faded raincoat, the hood clinging damply to her dark hair. Her face was pale under the streetlight's dull gold, lips parted as her eyes found Emma. The relief there was instant and fierce, a wave that looked ready to sweep both of them away. Emma, she breathed. Emma sprang forward, nearly slipping on the wet step, and buried herself in her mother's arms. The teddy bear was caught between them, squashed but loyal. Nora bent her head, pressing her cheek into her daughter's hair, her hands trembling even as they held steady. "We're gone a long time," Emma mumbled into the raincoat. "Time to move," ordered Joe. Nora kissed her forehead and pulled back just enough to look her over. "Are you hurt? Did anyone—" Her gaze shifted to Daniel, wary now. "Who are you?" He stayed on the top step, umbrella angled against the drizzle. "Daniel Cross. I found her in my car, or she found me, depending on how you look at it." Nora's eyes narrowed, protective instinct coiling like a spring. "In your car?" He kept his voice even. "She said, she was waiting for you. It was raining. I didn't want to leave her alone." Emma glanced between them. "He has a quiet car, Mom, and he didn't call the police yet." That yet didn't go unnoticed. Nora's lips pressed thin. She looked like a woman balancing exhaustion and gratitude on a knife's edge. "Thank you," she said finally, each word clipped careful. Daniel nodded. "May I ask, were you far?" "Why?" She brushed at a damp strand of hair. "The shift ran over. I told her to wait outside the store. I didn't think," her voice caught and she pulled Emma closer. "She doesn't wander off." "It didn't wander," Emma said earnestly. "I was finding quiet so I could think about soup." Despite himself, Daniel's mouth twitched. "Soup?" Emma nodded. "Mom's soup. It tastes like hugs." Nora's expression softened a fraction. She smoothed her daughter's hair, then looked back at him. "You can go now. We're fine." He almost did. He almost stepped into the rain, into the warm leather quiet of the sedan. But the envelope on the mailbox, the thinness in Nora's coat, the way Emma's shoes curled at the edges, they all argued against it. "Help," he said. "I can—" "We don't," Nora cut in, quick as a locked door. Emma blinked up at her. "But Mom, his car—" "Emma," she warned gently. Daniel nodded once, accepting the wall, even if he didn't believe in its strength. "All right, I'll be going." He turned toward the steps, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Cross?" He looked back. "Thank you," she said again, quieter this time, and without the clipped edges. He inclined his head, then stepped down to the sidewalk. The umbrella tilted back toward the rain, and the door closed behind him with the muffled finality of a chapter not quite finished. The ride away was quiet except for the hum of the tires. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the slip streets. The image of Emma's small, steady gaze sat in his mind like a pebble in his shoe. "Sir," the chauffeur asked at a red light, "do you want me to head to the office?" Daniel hesitated. "No, home." But when they passed the intersection near the grocery store, where Emma had slipped into his car, he glanced out at the cluster of people under the awning, their coats damp, their bags thin. The rain had slowed, but the air still smelled of wet concrete and cooking oil from the corner diner. Something about Emma's voice. "They'll separate us." Kate carried the same thread of fear his sister's voice had once held when she'd asked him not to send her away after their parents died. He'd sent her anyway, trusting a system that hadn't deserved it. The next evening, the rain was gone, but the sky still wore its gray. Daniel found himself in the same neighborhood, though he'd told himself he was only passing through. The stoop was empty. The mailbox still leaned forward, its red past due stamp half faded now, but no less loud. He almost left. Instead, he crossed the street and leaned against the sedan, watching the building. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Nora stepped out, her hair pulled into a loose bun, a tote bag slung over one shoulder. Emma trailed behind her, hopping to avoid cracks in the sidewalk. Nora saw him immediately. Her step faltered. "Mr. Cross?" "Call me Daniel," he said. "Are you following us?" He met her gaze evenly. "I was in the area." Emma grinned. "Is the car still quiet?" His heart in his throat. Nora's eyes narrowed again. "We're fine." He could have argued, could have mentioned the mailbox, the shoes, the way Emma had hesitated before giving her address. Instead, he asked, "Can I buy you both dinner?" "We have food at home." Emma tugged her mother's hand. "Soup?" Nora glanced down. "Yes, soup." Daniel nodded. "Then maybe another time." They passed him, their footsteps fading into the soft hum of the street. He stood there a while longer before getting back into the sedan. 3 days later, his phone buzzed in the middle of a meeting. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He excused himself and stepped into the hall. "Mr. Cross?" The voice was hesitant, familiar. Silence. Then, "Our building's heat is out. Emma's not feeling well. I wouldn't have called, but she kept saying, could he have a quiet car?" He finished for her. "Yeah. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived, Emma was curled on the couch under 2 blankets, Teddy at her side. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes heavy. Nora hovered close, her worries sharp enough to taste. "Let's get her somewhere warm," he said. Nora hesitated only a second before nodding. She bundled Emma up, and together they carried her to the sedan. Emma's head rested against Daniel's arm the whole ride, her breath warm and even. He didn't know what this was becoming, only that he wasn't walking away this time. The apartment door opened with a slow, dragging sound, as if the hinges had been begging for oil for years. Daniel stood in the dim hallway, his shoulders squared beneath the soft fall of his charcoal coat. Emma's head peeked out first, her hair mussed from sleep, her eyes bright in recognition. She glanced back inside before stepping aside. "Mama's in the kitchen," she whispered. "She said you can come in, but only for a minute." Daniel ducked under the low doorway and stepped into a room that smelled faintly of boiled vegetables and stale air. The space was small, the kind of small where every piece of furniture had to serve 2 purposes and still made the room feel crowded. At the far counter, a woman turned slowly. She was thin, with pale skin that held a hint of yellow beneath the surface. Her hair pulled back loosely, but with strands escaping around her temples. Maya Evans. She was younger than Daniel expected, maybe 29, but her eyes carried years her body shouldn't have had to live through yet. "You're Daniel Cross," she said, voice low, guarded. "Emma told me." "I am," he replied. "And you're Maya." She nodded once, as if confirming his right to stand there but not to linger. Her gaze flicked to Emma, then back to him. She didn't mean trouble. She does things sometimes, wandering, but she's careful. Flipping into a stranger's car isn't careful, Daniel said evenly. Maya's chin lifted, though the movement was slight. You're right, but she wouldn't have if she didn't feel safe. She has a sense about people. He let the comment hang between them. Emma had drifted to her mother's side, clutching the hem of Maya's sweater with both hands. Her eyes weren't on Daniel now, they were on her mother, studying every movement, every breath. Came to see if you needed anything, Daniel said. When we spoke, you sounded... We're fine. The interruption was swift, clipped. I appreciate what you did, but you can go now. Daniel's gaze swept the room without moving his head. On the counter beside Maya, 3 orange prescription bottles stood in a haphazard line. Behind them, an oxygen tank rested against the wall, its valve turned slightly toward the floor. Unopened envelopes lay scattered nearby, some with the faint, unmistakable imprint of red stamps across the paper. Fine, he repeated softly. Is that what you call this? Maya's eyes hardened, though her shoulders dipped, betraying fatigue. I said, we're fine. Emma's hand tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. Mama, he's just asking. Maya knelt, smoothing her daughter's hair with a palm that trembled more than she probably realized. Sweetheart, go get Teddy. He's in your room. Emma hesitated but obeyed, shuffling off toward the narrow hallway. Daniel waited until the small footsteps faded. You're sick, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. As Maya's lips pressed together. It's manageable. Those medications and that tank don't look manageable. She glanced toward the oxygen tank as if surprised it had betrayed her. I don't need your charity, Mr. Cross. Isn't about charity. Of course it is. Men like you don't show up at women's doors for any other reason. The words carried both steel and resignation, like someone who'd said them before and had them proven true. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. I'm here because your daughter was sitting in my car, telling me to shut up so she could think. That doesn't happen to me, and when something unusual happens, I find out why. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but the defensive edge in her tone eased just enough to reveal the exhaustion beneath. You've found out. Now you can leave. Emma returned then, clutching Teddy under one arm. She slipped between them, her small body pressing into Maya's side. Daniel saw it, the way Emma's eyes lingered on her mother's face, searching for signs, gauging her breathing. This wasn't the casual closeness of a child to a parent. This was watchfulness. He glanced once more at the counter. The bills, the medication, the tank? They were pieces of a puzzle that fit together too clearly, and yet, her pride built walls as high as any corporate negotiation he'd faced. We'll go, he said finally, but his voice was measured, deliberate. If you need anything, we won't. Daniel looked at Emma then. Take care of your mom, Emma. I always do, she said softly. He turned toward the door, his hand on the knob. Behind him, he heard Maya let out a slow breath, the kind people take when the conversation has ended, but the weight of it still presses on their chest. When the door shut behind him, the dim hallway seemed brighter than the apartment he'd left. But the image of Emma standing guard beside her mother, a 7-year-old already carrying more than she should, stayed with him all the way down the stairs. Daniel descended the narrow flight of stairs, the creak of each wooden step echoing in the stairwell. Outside, the chill of the late afternoon air hit him, but it did little to clear the heaviness lodged in his chest. He crossed the cracked sidewalk toward his waiting sedan, yet he found himself slowing, glancing back at the peeling door to Maya's apartment. Inside, she was probably telling Emma to stay away from him, warning her not to trust strangers, even if those strangers drove expensive cars and wore tailored suits. Pride was often the last currency people in her position had left, and she seemed determined to protect it at all costs. He slid into the back seat, but instead of giving his driver the order to leave, he sat in silence. His eyes shifted to the faint reflection of himself in the tinted glass, the sharp lines of his face, the practiced neutrality, and then, unbidden, another face rose in his mind, his sisters, younger, bright-eyed, still believing the world was fair before it proved her wrong. He hadn't kept that promise. "Sir?" the driver prompted. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on his knee. "Not yet." He turned his gaze back toward the apartment building. The curtains in Maya's window fluttered, and for a brief moment, a small figure appeared between them. Emma. She was peering out, the teddy bear visible against the glass. When she spotted him looking, she didn't wave. She simply stood there, watching, her expression unreadable. Daniel raised a hand in a half gesture, but before he could finish, she stepped back, the curtain falling into place. Something about the quietness of it, the absence of any demand, any plea, unsettled him more than if she'd called out for help. He broke the silence. "Drive?" As the car pulled away from the curb, he leaned back, but his eyes stayed fixed on the side mirror until the building was nothing more than a smudge in the distance. By the time he reached his penthouse, the city's lights had begun to blink alive against the evening sky. He should have gone straight to his study, should have lost himself in the work waiting on his desk, but instead, he found himself pacing the wide expanse of his living room, replaying every detail of the afternoon. The cracked linoleum under his shoes in her kitchen, the slight tremor in her hands. The sound of Emma's voice when she said, "I always do." It was infuriating how easily the memory clung to him. He had spent years perfecting the art of compartmentalizing, keeping emotions in neatly labeled boxes and tucking them where they couldn't interfere with his life. And yet, this mother and daughter had slipped past every lock. By the next morning, the rational part of him was still arguing that he should let it go. Maya had made herself clear. She didn't want help, and in his world, you didn't force help on those who refused it. But the image of the unopened bills, the oxygen tank, and Emma's watchful eyes sat in the back of his mind like a weight he couldn't shake. In his office, he caught himself staring at his phone more than once. Finally, he muttered a curse under his breath and called his head of security. "I need you to check on someone," he said, quietly. "No one knows it's me asking." "Of course, sir. Who?" Daniel hesitated. "Maya Evans, and her daughter Emma, lives in the East End, off Brookside Avenue. I want to know how bad it really is." There was a pause on the other end before his man replied, "Understood." When he ended the call, he told himself it was only to confirm she didn't need his interference. But deep down, he already knew the truth. He wanted proof of what he'd seen in her eyes. That evening, the report came back. The apartment rent was overdue. Utility shut-off notices had been posted twice in the last month. Medical records suggested chronic respiratory illness, worsened by stress. No immediate family nearby. He read it twice, the tension in his jaw tightening with each line. It confirmed everything he suspected, and something else. If Maya kept refusing help, the clock on that little family was ticking down faster than she'd admit. For hours, he tried to focus on his work, but the words on the page blurred until he pushed it all aside. In the quiet of his study, his mind returned again to the cramped apartment, to the way Emma stood beside her mother like a sentry. He had walked away once from someone who needed him. This time, he wasn't sure he could. The next afternoon, Daniel found himself back on Brookside Avenue, the sleek black sedan too polished for the row of weathered buildings. He sat for a long while before getting out, the winter air stinging his face. Inside the hallway, the same peeling door stood before him. He could almost hear Maya's voice telling him to leave before he even knocked. And yet, his hand rose, rapping against the wood. When she opened it, her surprise was quickly masked by the same guarded expression. "You again?" "I said I'd leave you alone," Daniel began. "But, clear?" He exhaled. Her eyes flicked to Emma, who was peering around the corner. Maya stepped into the doorway, lowering her voice. "You don't understand, Mr. Cross. We don't need saving." He held her gaze. "Maybe not, but everyone needs a chance." For a moment, neither of them moved. Behind her, Emma's small voice floated into the hall. "Mama? Is he staying?" Maya's jaw tightened. "No, sweetheart, he's leaving." Daniel felt the words like a door closing. And maybe it was, but as he turned to go, he caught Emma's eyes one last time. There it was again, not fear of him, not even hope, but the quiet, stubborn resilience of someone too young to have to carry it. As he stepped back into the cold, he knew this wasn't the last time he'd see them, whether Maya wanted him to or not. Daniel sat in his office long after the city outside had gone dark, the lights from neighboring skyscrapers casting pale reflections on the glass wall behind him. The day's work sat untouched on his desk. His mind kept circling back to the look on Maya's face, the way her pride seemed almost weaponized, a shield against the world. He told himself he didn't owe her anything, yet here he was, reaching for his phone, dialing a number only a handful of people had. "Clara," he said when his assistant answered, "I need you to look into someone for me. Discreetly. No one outside this office needs to know." Clara's voice was brisk. "Name? Aya Evans. Lives on Brookside Avenue, East Side. Start with work history, anything that might explain her situation." She didn't ask questions. That was one of the reasons he kept her close. "I'll have something for you by morning," she said. True to her word, a file landed on his desk before sunrise. Daniel opened it, scanning the first page, and then stopped. Maya Evans, age 29, former editorial assistant at Westmere Publishing, a modest but reputable house he had once invested in. Employment dates: 3 years. Termination. His brow furrowed. Westmere. It had been nearly 8 years since he'd last dealt with them directly. The investment had seemed solid until whispers of mismanagement started filtering up. He remembered calling for an internal audit, pushing for accountability. It had ended with a few terminations, including one senior manager, but he'd left the operational cleanup to the board. He kept reading. Maya's resignation coincided with the scandal, a period when several employees were quietly let go or resigned under pressure. The file contained a newspaper clipping from that time. Westmere manager fired amid misconduct allegations. The article was vague, but internal notes from Clara's digging painted a darker picture. Stolen manuscript rights in exchange for severance. Maya had been one of those affected. And yet? Daniel flipped to the final page. It showed a ledger of settlements issued to staff during the restructuring. Most had signed. Maya's name was on the list, marked unclaimed. She had walked away from the money. Money that could have changed her circumstances even back then. He sat back in his chair, fingers drumming against the desk. This wasn't just bad luck or poor choices. This was someone's mess, a mess that had intersected with his own sphere of influence, and he'd never even known her name until now. The longer he stared at the file, the more a quiet frustration took root. He had been the one to push for the removal of the corrupt manager. He had been the one to demand reforms, and yet, while he'd moved on, people like Maya had been left to pick up the pieces in silence. He reached for the intercom. "Clara, get me the old Westmere audit reports from that year. All of them. And if you can, pull any personnel complaints tied to Gordon Hale." Gordon Hale. The name struck him like a bad taste. The former acquisitions manager had been charming in meetings, but left a trail of bruised reputations behind him. Daniel remembered the satisfaction of signing the termination order, thinking it was justice served. But justice had apparently never reached everyone it should have. When Clara returned with the documents, Daniel skimmed through them with a growing sense of unease. Maya's complaint had been there, buried among others, citing stolen editorial credit and intimidation. Her words were concise, almost clinical, but between the lines he saw the exhaustion, the quiet anger. The recommendation in the margin read, "Offer settlement, avoid litigation," except she had refused. He imagined the scene. A younger Maya, sitting across from some corporate attorney, being told she could walk away with a check if she just kept quiet. And instead, she had stood, thanked them, and walked out with nothing. Pride again, or maybe principle. Either way, it had cost her. Daniel closed the folder, the weight of it settling heavily on his desk. This wasn't just a chance encounter anymore. Fate, coincidence, whatever it was, it had linked them long before Emma climbed into his. He rose from his chair, moving to the wide window overlooking the city. The streets below teemed with life, unaware of the quiet stories woven through its veins. He thought about Emma's wary eyes, Maya's pale defiance, and the bills piled on the counter of that cramped apartment. He had once told himself you couldn't save everyone, that life was cleaner when you didn't try. But here was someone he might have saved without even knowing she needed saving, and now, perhaps, it wasn't too late. When he finally turned away from the glass, his decision was made. "Clara," he called, "find me everything I need to clear her old settlement. And don't tell her yet. I want to see her face when she hears it from me." There was a pause, then Clara's quiet, knowing reply, "Understood." Daniel didn't know if Maya would accept it, not with that fierce independence of hers. But this time, he wouldn't let the past slip away unanswered. Daniel had told himself to keep it professional, to treat this like any other problem that needed solving. But the moment he stepped out of his car in front of Maya's building, the cracked sidewalk and peeling paint on the front door made that promise feel flimsy. He climbed the narrow stairwell, the air thick with the faint scent of mildew and stale cigarettes from neighboring apartments. At the top, he knocked, his knuckles brushing against. When Maya opened the door, she looked the same as the last time he'd seen her. Tired, pale, her hair loose around her face, but there was a flicker of wariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Finally," she said cautiously, "why are you here?" He didn't waste time. "I know you're sick. I know you're struggling. I can help you, both of you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've already done enough by returning Emma. We're fine." "You're not," he said, stepping past the threshold before she could stop him. He didn't look around this time. He had already memorized the cluttered space, the stack of unopened bills, the oxygen tank in the corner. "I can cover your medical bills, get you a private doctor, better treatment. I can arrange a better place for you to live, somewhere safe." Her arms crossed defensively. "And why would you do that? Out of guilt? Pity? Because if it's charity?" "It's not charity," he cut in. "Think of it as what should have been yours years ago, what was taken from you." That gave her pause, but only for a moment. "I don't want it. Whatever you think I'm owed, I've learned to live without." He searched her face, looking for some sign she might waver. "You don't have to prove anything by suffering. This isn't weakness. It's not yours to decide," she said sharply. Her voice didn't rise, but the finality in it was louder than any shout. Emma's voice drifted in from the bedroom before he could respond. "Mom? Who's here?" Aya hesitated, then called back softly, "It's just someone from work." But Emma had already padded into the living room, her worn socks silent against the floor. She looked between them, sensing the tension instantly. "Who's going on?" Emma asked, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Nothing you need to worry about," Maya said quickly, forcing a smile. "Daniel was just leaving." Daniel met Emma's gaze and saw something there. Hope, maybe, or fear? It was hard to tell. "I was offering to help," he said carefully. "To make sure your mom gets better?" Emma froze, her small hands tightening around the frayed hem of her sweater. "You can help her?" Maya's tone turned firm. "Emma, I told you." She said we didn't need help, Emma interrupted, her voice trembling now. "But you're getting worse. You can't sleep, you can't breathe without that stupid machine. You're always tired." Her voice broke, and tears welled up. "I don't want you to die, Mom." The room went very still. Maya closed her eyes, the words hitting her like a physical blow. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen boardroom arguments turn savage, seen men fight for millions without flinching. But this small, shaking voice was harder than any of that. Maya knelt down, taking Emma's face in her hands. "Hey, I'm not going anywhere." But even as she said it, her voice cracked on the last word. Emma shook her head. "You don't know that. He can help you. Why won't you let him?" Daniel stayed silent, knowing this wasn't his moment to push. He could see the war playing out in Maya's eyes, the instinct to protect her daughter from relying on anyone, the pride that had kept her standing all these years, colliding with the reality of Emma's fear. Finally, Maya stood, her expression hardening again. "Thank you for your offer, Daniel, but I can't accept it. We'll manage." Something in him snapped, not in anger, but in resolve. "You think refusing makes you strong," he said quietly. "But strength isn't just about standing alone. It's about knowing when to let someone stand with you. Her eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat. But then she opened the door. "Good night, Daniel." He stepped out into the hallway, the click of the lock following him like a verdict. As he descended the stairs, he felt the weight of both rejection and determination settle in his chest. She could lock him out for now, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he wasn't done. The call came while Daniel was staring at the city from his penthouse window. His phone buzzed, once, twice, then lit with an unknown number and a trembling voice when he answered. "You don't know me," the woman said, breathless. "I live next door to Maya Evans." She collapsed. "I found your card by her door. Please, she has a little girl." Everything in him moved at once. He didn't ask for details. He grabbed his jacket, barked to his driver to meet him downstairs, and ran for the elevator. The night outside was rain black. He had never hated distance so much. In the car, he called the hospital, then called again, then called his assistant to wake their medical liaison. "I want updates the moment she's triaged," he said, voice low, clipped, lethal. By the time he strode through the fluorescent corridors, his heart was beating in a hard, unfamiliar rhythm. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Emma sat alone in a plastic chair, bare knees pulled to her chest, her teddy bear strangled in both hands. The moment she saw him, she stood too fast and nearly fell. He caught her. "Is she alive?" she asked. No greeting, no apology, just the question that mattered. "You're with her now," he said. "I'm here. I've got you." She nodded and sank back into the chair. He crouched, his suit pulling, and said gently, "What happened?" Her cup dropped. It broke. Her voice was thin and papery. "I thought she just tripped. Then she didn't wake up. The neighbor came. The ambulance came. They wouldn't let me go with her. I ran behind the stretcher until they told me to stay." She pressed her forehead to the bear's stitched ear. "I told her to wake up." Daniel swallowed. He had negotiated contracts bigger than countries, but the urge to promise now was almost unbearable. "She's here," he said, "and she's not alone." A nurse approached, eyes scanning the room for any adult who looked like they belonged to the child. Daniel stood, shoulders squaring. "I'm with Emma and her mother," he said. "I'll handle paperwork." They were ushered to a desk with a lamp. Forms appeared as if conjured: insurance, emergency contacts, consent for additional testing. Daniel didn't flinch at the stack. He pulled out his pen, then realized the one thing he couldn't fill: relationship. He wasn't family. His mouth tightened. "Put mine as primary contact for billing and care coordination," he told the nurse. "And call my office, though fax authorization for full coverage." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, without legal..." He slid a card across the counter. "Call the number on the back. Use the words priority case." His tone softened a fraction. "Please." The nurse looked at Emma, rigid. She nodded and picked up the phone. And they moved back to the hard chairs. Emma's feet didn't touch the floor. Daniel sat beside her, leaving a respectful inch of empty space. At last she whispered, "Am I in trouble? For getting in your car? For asking you to stop talking?" "Did he?" He said, and the word was steady. "You were brave. You were looking for quiet. You were looking for help." Her shoulders unknotted. "I didn't mean to be mean," she said. "Sometimes my head gets too loud. When Mom can't breathe right, it gets louder." He nodded. "Sometimes adults try to fix things with words because we're bad at sitting with the noise. You told me to shut up because you needed quiet. I understand." The doors to the trauma bay swung open, a doctor walking out fast, scanning the room. "Family for Maya Evans?" Daniel stood with Emma. "Here," he said. The doctor led them aside, voice even, eyes tired. Ms. Evans suffered a respiratory crisis, likely complicated by fluid retention and infection. "We've stabilized her airway and started antibiotics, but she needs a surgical procedure to address the underlying issue. It must happen soon, and the postoperative care will be intensive." His gaze shifted to Emma. "Are you her guardian?" "I'm her daughter," Emma said, holding the bear tighter. Daniel answered before the doctor could stumble. "I'm a responsible party. Every expense will be covered. I want the best surgical team available, immediate transfer if necessary, and a private room when she's stable." The doctor's brows lifted a millimeter, but he didn't argue. All right, we'll page cardiothoracic and pulmonology. There's a consent we'll need signed. Send it, Daniel said. I'll sign and assign. They returned to the seats. Emma didn't speak. He just stayed, present and solid, until the nurse arrived with forms and a stylus, explaining the consent in simple language Emma could hear without being terrified. Daniel signed, and as he handed the tablet back, he said one sentence that surprised even him. If any department hesitates, call me, and then call my attorney. This is not... Emma watched his profile, then whispered, "Are you mad at us?" He looked at her. "No, I'm mad at time. I'm mad at red tape. I'm mad at the way good people fall through cracks," he exhaled. "But I'm not mad at you." She let out a breath she'd been holding since the ambulance. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay." A minute stretched. Lights blinked. Somewhere a vending machine coughed out a can. Daniel opened his phone, wrote 3 messages at once, to his chief of staff, to the hospital board member he knew, to a surgeon whose daughter he'd once sponsored through a music program. The replies were immediate and decisive. "On my way. We'll clear a room. Consider it done." When he put the phone away, Emma had slumped against the chair back, eyes half closed but vigilant. He took off his jacket and folded it, then did something he wasn't sure he had any right to do. "You can use this as a blanket," he said. She hesitated, then accepted. The jacket swallowed her shoulders. Only the bear's ear peeked out. "Do you think she'll be mad?" she asked. Emma whispered. "For not stopping it." He shook his head. "Illness isn't something we stop alone. That's why we have teams, and tonight you built one by calling for help in the ways you could." Her mouth trembled. "I didn't call. The neighbor did." She yelled for the neighbor? "That's strategy. That matters." The slightest ghost of a smile flickered and vanished. She turned her face into the collar of his jacket. He stared at the emergency doors until the white felt like a shout. Then, softly, Emma said, "Thank you for not leaving." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The doors opened again. The doctor motioned them over. "We have the surgical team ready. We'll take Miss Evans upstairs now. The procedure will take a few hours. You can wait in the family lounge on the 3rd floor. Someone will come update you midway." Moments later, Emma's fingers closed around Daniel's hand without asking. He didn't let go. They rode the elevator together, the cables humming, Emma counting the floors under her breath while Daniel watched the numbers, willing them to move faster toward hope. The family lounge was a dim rectangle, with a coffee machine that wheezed like an old harmonica, and a television stuck on a nature channel where snow leopards stalked the edge of night. Daniel guided Emma to a corner couch and found a blanket folded in a cabinet. She took it, still wrapped in his jacket, a small fortress of fabric around a very tired child. "Do you want something warm?" he asked. "Tea, hot chocolate?" "If you like," replied Logan. "But hot chocolate," she said, then added, "Please." He smiled despite himself. "Coming right up." He fed quarters into the machine, pressed the button, and watched brown sweetness churn into a paper cup. When he brought it back, Emma cupped it with both hands, closed her eyes, and inhaled the steam as if it were courage. She blew once and sipped. "Too hot," she murmured, but she didn't let go. Silence returned, gentler now. Daniel loosened his tie and sat beside her again. "When I was little," he said, keeping his voice low, "my sister used to tell me to hush during storms because she was counting between lightning and thunder. She said it made the world feel less wild." Emma's eyes opened. "Did it work?" "Sometimes. Mostly, it helped her breathe." He glanced at the door. "Counting can be good." She nodded and began to count the slow red blink of the emergency exit sign. 1, 2, 3. Between numbers, she asked, "Are you rich?" He huffed a quiet laugh. "Yes. Is that why you can buy doctors?" "I can pay for time and skill and tools," he said. "I can't buy love. I can help make space for it." She considered that, then took another sip. "Mom says love is a job that never ends. And money makes some jobs easier and some harder." It's right again. Emma's mouth curved, a tiny triumph for her mother in absentia. The door opened. A nurse stepped in with an update. "We've started the procedure. The initial response is promising. The surgeon will speak to you when they're further along. Thank you, Daniel said. Emma's shoulders sagged with a relief so pure he felt it like a shift in gravity. Time stretched into a soft, anxious ribbon. Emma eventually fell sideways, her head against the couch arm, the bear under her cheek, the cup empty and safe on the table. Daniel stood, shrugged out of his vest, and draped it over her feet. He paced once, twice, then forced himself to sit and stay. He sent 2 more emails, then none, then silenced the phone completely and put it face down. The television murmured of the outrage. The snow leopards vanished into dusk. A janitor pushed a mop down the far hallway, the sound soft and steady. Daniel's mind circled the same questions, the same regrets. He thought of the first time Emma told him to shut up, a defense of quiet that had been, he realized now, a map. She knew what she needed. She knew what her mother needed. The world just hadn't been listening loudly enough. The lounge door clicked. The surgeon stood there, cap in hand, eyes clear. Daniel rose so fast the chair scraped. Emma startled awake, blinking. The surgeon smiled at her first. "Your mom is very strong," he said. "The operation went well. She's in recovery. She'll be drowsy, but we think she'll like hearing your voice." Emma's hands flew to her mouth. Tears leapt and broke free. Daniel felt his own throat tighten. "Thank you," he said, and the words were not enough, but they were true. They were led through a series of hallways, the world narrowing to antiseptic brightness and the shuffle of shoe covers. In recovery, Maya lay pale but steady, a world away from the collapsed figure on the kitchen floor. Tubes and monitors sang in careful harmonies. Emma hovered, suddenly shy. "Go on," Daniel whispered. "Say hi." Emma stepped close and placed her small palm on the bedrail. "Hi, Mom," she said, voice shaking and brave. "I'm here. I didn't leave. Mr. Daniel didn't leave either. We brought hot chocolate. I saved you some." Aya's eyelids fluttered. She didn't wake, but the faintest Easian moved across her features, as if, even unconscious, she recognized the shape of her daughter's words. Emma reached for her mother's fingers and threaded them with her own. The monitor ticked its patient song. The nurse smiled from the foot of the bed. "We'll move her to a room soon. One adult can stay overnight." Emma looked up immediately. "Can I?" "You're still too little for the sleeping chair," the nurse said kindly. "But you can stay late." Her eyes lifted to Daniel. "We'll need an adult to sign the overnight." "Stay," Daniel said. The decision was already made in his bones. Emma didn't protest. She simply nodded, then yawned so wide, a squeak escaped. He touched her shoulder. "Let's get you washed up. You can come back before bed and tell her one more thing." They found the family restroom. Emma scrubbed her hands, then stared at herself in the mirror, as if relearning her own face. "Do you think she heard me?" "I do," he said. "I think she'll hear you again tonight, and tomorrow, and the day after." Emma nodded. "Okay." She glanced at his tie, loosened and crooked. "You look different without the tie." "Nicer?" He laughed, the first clean laugh of the night. "I'll try to remember that." Maya's room was ready within the hour. The lights were low, the air warmer, the monitors calmer. Emma climbed onto the parent chair with the precision of someone who had practiced safety 100 times. "Can I read?" she asked. "Of course." She pulled a battered book from her backpack, the spine mended with tape. "We read this when the machines hound fury," she said. Her small voice filled the room, the bear tucked under her arm like an assistant librarian. Once, her voice broke on a word. Daniel finished the sentence for her and pretended nothing unusual had happened. Emma continued, steadier. When the chapter ended, the nurse slipped in again. "It's late, sweetheart. Time to let your mom rest." Emma slid down reluctantly, brushed a strand of hair from Maya's forehead with a tenderness that rewrote the word careful, and whispered, "I'll be back in the morning." Daniel walked her to the elevator, then to the curb where his driver waited. The city smelled like rain and warmed asphalt. He opened the door. Emma paused with one sneaker on the step. "You're coming back, right?" "I'm staying," he said. "You go sleep. I'll be here when you wake up." She nodded, swallowed, and climbed in. The car pulled away. He watched the taillights until they blurred, then turned and went back inside. The night reshaped itself around beeps and quiet footsteps and the long, low hum of machines doing their unglamorous miracles. Daniel sat in the chair by Maya's bed, not touching anything that didn't need him, anchoring the space with presence. He answered a text from his assistant. "Everything authorized," and another from the neighbor. "Emma's with me. We're okay," he typed back. "Thank you." He meant it more deeply than the words. Maya stirred near dawn, surfacing into a shallow awareness. Her eyes opened a sliver. Daniel leaned forward. "You're safe," he said, careful with the syllables. "Emma's safe. You're in good hands." Her gaze tracked, searching, then softened, as if memory rewound and found his face. She didn't try to speak. She didn't need to. Gratitude lived there anyway, stitched into the fragile curve of her mouth. He sat back and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been rationing. In the window's reflection, he didn't look like a CEO or a headline. He looked like a man awake for the right reasons. The sky paled, the world returned to color. When Emma arrived, hair damp, eyes bright with worry and relief, she ran straight to the bed. "Mom," she whispered, "I brought the rest of the hot chocolate. It's cold now, but it still counts." Daniel smiled. It did. It counted, the way everything that mattered counted, not by temperature or timing, but by who stayed when the night turned hard and the machines kept time. And he had decided, without speeches, without promises, to be one of the people who stayed. Daniel kept his promise. He showed up every morning with coffee for the nurses and a paper cup of hot chocolate for Emma, who always sniffed it first like a small detective verifying evidence. He never walked in loudly. He would pause at the threshold, knock on the frame with 2 quiet taps, and wait for Maya to nod from visitor to presence. The routine became a rhythm, vipals beeping, curtains sighing, voices low, Emma's shoes squeaking. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, the kind of steadiness that stitches days together when fear wants to tear them apart. Maya watched him with the caution of someone who had learned the price of depending on others. The first days, she mostly slept, surfacing long enough to sip water and adjust her oxygen. When she was awake, she listened to Emma's retellings of school projects and hallway adventures, to the nurses comparing night shifts, to Daniel answering Emma's endless questions. "How tall is your building? Do you own the moon? Do rich people wear watches when there are clocks on phones?" He answered patiently, sometimes seriously, sometimes with a crooked grin that startled even him. Maya kept her eyes half closed and pretended not to track every expression. Trust didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in like the slow warming of a room. Daniel learned how Maya liked the pillows angled, which elevator rattled near the 6th floor, which phlebotomist to request, which days Emma's homework needed extra eyes. He never tried to be in charge of the small things that belonged to them. He asked before he reached for a blanket. He asked before he brought a book. He asked if music helped, then learned which songs made Emma dance and which made Maya sleep. On the 5th day, Maya woke to find him at the window with Emma, teaching her how to fold a paper crane from a cafeteria napkin. Emma's tongue stuck out the side of her mouth in concentration. Daniel's hands were large but precise. When they were done, he handed the crane to Emma and bowed his head like a magician who knew the trick still mattered. Emma ran it to the bed. "Mom, it's a flying napkin," she announced. "It doesn't clean anything. It just looks pretty." "Sounds like some people I used to know," Maya murmured. Daniel did not pretend not to hear. He only smiled and said, "This one's hard-working. It already folded itself twice." Later, when the nurse adjusted Maya's IV, Daniel stepped into the hall. Maya watched his back through the glass. He wore an ordinary gray sweater and jeans instead of the armor of a suit. He looked almost human there, hands in pockets, forehead against the window, eyes on the city as if remembering the world existed beyond boardrooms. She didn't know what to do with the empathy that stirred for him. She also didn't trust it. Empathy had led her into believing charm before, but this didn't feel like charm, it felt like attention. He started, bringing books from the charity library his company funded. Picture books printed on thick pages, one about a bear who collected umbrellas, and another about a girl who counted constellations. "Company perk?" Maya asked, dryly. With board member guilt, he said, "We donate. I decided to borrow with interest. She smirked. What's the interest? You loan me your taste. I'm hopeless at picking the right level. Emma picked for both of them. They read aloud in the evenings, Daniel voicing the punctuation like stage directions. Comma, he intoned. Long pause, Emma countered, giggling. Once, Maya woke from a doze to hear them giving the bear a radio announcer's voice. The sound threaded through her fatigue like a light. On day 7, the doctor used the word improving. It landed in the room with a weight that made Emma cry without warning. Daniel handed her a tissue. Don't apologize for water, he said. It keeps people alive. Maya's guard loosened a notch. She studied him while he stood at the sink rinsing a bowl. He didn't do it like a man performing kindness for an audience. He did it like a person who had finally found something useful to do with his hands. Why are you really here? She asked, when Emma stepped out to fetch a coloring sheet. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. Because Emma asked me to stay, he said, and because I could help, and because, once you start standing still in a storm, you realize the storm doesn't own you. It sounds rehearsed. It's new, he said, but I've been practicing in my head. She looked at her lap. I don't like being a charity project. You aren't? His voice didn't sharpen. It settled. You're a person I met on the worst night. Helping is not ownership, it's proximity. If I say I don't want proximity after I'm discharged? Listen, he said. Then he added carefully, I will always answer Emma's call. That truth wasn't soft, it was respectful. She nodded once. You don't smile much, she said. I'm rusty, he admitted. Emma burst back in, hair wild. They have green jello today, she announced, breathless. It jiggled like a tiny earthquake. Perfect, Daniel said. The city could use more harmless earthquakes. Harry is too serious, Emma told Maya. He said, he'll practice laughing. I think he needs homework. Maya's mouth tilted. Give him extra credit, she said. He's good with cranes. The next morning, Daniel arrived without a tie. Emma presented him with a sticker that said, Hello, my name is Guest, which she had embellished with a drawing of a moon. So you can rent it, she explained. Hear you. He wore it all day. That afternoon, Maya agreed to walk the hallway with the therapist. She took 10 careful steps while Emma counted backward from 100 in bursts of 5s. Daniel didn't hover. He paced a parallel line, hands loose, ready if she stumbled, but letting the therapist lead. At the turn by the vending machines, Maya stopped to breathe. Daniel offered water without comment. She drank, then met his eyes. Thank you, she said, and meant it for more than the cup. In the evening, the sky blushed purple beyond the glass. Emma arranged their napkin cranes along the sill like a flock preparing for migration. Where do they go when we're sleeping? She asked. Where? We can't follow, Maya said, stroking her hair. But they always come back. Daniel looked at the cranes, at the bed, at the little family forming around a crisis. He didn't say the word family aloud. He didn't have to. He just stayed until the machines sang their steady lullaby and Emma fell asleep with his sticker stuck crooked on her sweater. Daniel did not try to fill every silence on the ward. He learned to honor them. On Tuesday, he sat by the window while Emma made a hospital bracelet chain, linking the cut ends into a little plastic snake. When she finished, she slipped it onto his wrist. You're official now, she declared. Guardian of napkin cranes. He saluted her with mock solemnity, and Maya's laugh, unexpected. He stored it away like a treasure he knew better than to name. The new specialist arrived with a measured smile and a printout of a recovery plan. He explained post-op medications, home care, and the schedule of follow-ups with the careful cadence of a teacher who understood the value of pace. Daniel listened, asked queer questions, and never once answered for Maya. When the doctor directed a question to her, he fell quiet and looked at her, not at the chart. Later, alone with him, Maya said, "You're different in here." "It's here," he replied. "There's nothing to sell." He brought fresh clothes that didn't rustle and soup that smelled like rosemary. Emma tried a spoonful, wrinkled her nose, and then decided she loved it because, as she explained, "It tastes like a garden, is giving me a hug." Maya took more than 2 sips. Daniel pretended not to see the way relief softened the angle of her shoulders. On Wednesday morning, the social worker visited to discuss discharge logistics. The apartment was a problem. Too many stairs, unreliable heat. Daniel offered options without pressure. An accessible rental already paid through the end of the year, professional cleaning at the old place so nothing would be lost while they decided, storage containers labeled and delivered. Maya hesitated, fingers worrying the edge of her blanket. "I don't want to owe you," she said. "You won't," he said softly. "You'll owe the future. You'll pay it forward to the next person who needs it." He took a breath. "But if you want to owe someone, owe Emma. She asked me to help, and I said yes." Emma nodded vigorously, curls bouncing. "I'm the boss," she said. "He works for me." "Her HR department is relentless," Daniel said to Maya, and the joke eased some invisible knot. That afternoon, the hospital arranged a brief visit to the therapy gym. Maya shuffled between parallel bars, and Emma walked beside her, mirror steps in miniature. Daniel wiped the equipment handles with a corner of his sleeve and pretended it was part of the ritual. The therapist praised the alignment of Maya's spine. "Strong," she said, "even when she doesn't feel it." Back in the room, Maya found a folded note beside the cranes. Daniel had written in neat block letters, "You are carrying the weight of a cathedral. Let someone hold the door." She stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into the drawer with the hospital socks, as if giving it a place made it true. Evenings grew gentler. Emma drew portraits of everyone who crossed their doorway. The night nurse with the galaxy earrings, the janitor with the gentle whistle, the phlebotomist who told jokes about oranges. She drew Daniel too, in a sweater with a moon sticker and a smile that showed too many teeth. "I didn't know I had that many," he told Maya. "You do when you're not bracing for impact," she replied. The words surprised them both. Thursday brought a test of boundaries. A well-meaning volunteer stopped in with a basket of cookies and a camera, asking permission to feature a heartwarming family moment on the hospital's social page. Maya froze. Daniel stepped forward, gentle but firm. "No photos," he said. "No stories that aren't ours to tell." The volunteer retreated with apologies. Maya's relief came out as weariness. "Thank you," she said later. "Everyone understands that help without dignity isn't help." "I'm learning," he said. Emma lined up her cranes and whispered to them as if they were messengers. "Tell Mom she's brave," she instructed. "Tell Daniel to stop being scared of laughing." "I heard that," he said. "Good," she replied. "You're supposed to." On Friday, Maya asked him about his sister. She had seen the way grief lived in the space behind his careful sentences. He told her the outline, how she had been restless and bright, how the year he left for college was the year she fell in with a fast group, how he missed calls because he thought there would be more time. "There is never more time," he said. The admission sat heavy between them. Maya reached for the call button, then for his sleeve instead. "You're here now," she said. "You showed up for a stranger at midnight. Your sister would know what that means." He swallowed, nodded, and let the silence stand like a bridge that did not need anyone to cross it to be real. Over the weekend, the word home came up more often. The case manager scheduled a delivery of home equipment. Daniel coordinated without hovering. He let Maya choose the recliner fabric and the route she wanted the moving team to take to avoid the neighbor with the noisy dog. He set up autopay for the utility accounts in a way that listed Maya as the primary. "You need control," he said, "not supervision." Emma tested the new recliner with a scientist's thoroughness. "It passes," she announced, "but it needs a pocket for secret snacks." "We'll negotiate with manufacturing," Daniel said. They often caved to good ideas. On Sunday afternoon, the cafeteria ran out of green Jell-O, and Emma mourned as if a dear friend had moved away. Daniel promised a replacement ceremony at home involving lime sorbet, club soda, and 3 napkin cranes serving as officiants. "You're ridiculous," Maya told him, smiling. "Occupational hazard," he said. "I was the serious one. Long." As the first week of recovery closed, the trio sat together by the window while the city bruised into evening. Daniel read the last page of the Umbrella Bear book. Emma tucked her head under Maya's arm. "When we go home," she said, "can Daniel visit our couch?" Maya looked at him. Trust is not a declaration, she thought. It is 1,000 small permissions. She measured her breath, then gave one. Yes, she said. He can visit our couch. Daniel did not thank her out loud. He nodded, touched 2 fingers to the moon sticker still stuck to his sweater, and watched the cranes keep watch over the window, as if ready to return whenever called. The day Maya left the hospital, the air smelled different. Not of disinfectant and filtered air, but of the damp pavement outside, of the faint perfume of early spring. She stood at the curb in a soft sweater and jeans, the first clothes she'd worn that didn't belong to the hospital in weeks. Emma clung to her hand, practically vibrating with the urge to skip. Daniel was beside them, not hovering, but close enough to take the early night bag from Maya when she finally gave in and let him. They didn't return to the old apartment. Instead, a taxi wound through streets Maya hadn't walked in years, stopping in front of a modest brick building with wide windows and a green awning over the door. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor to a hallway washed in soft light. Daniel handed Maya the key, as if this were routine. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. The living room had a couch in a deep blue that made Emma squeal and throw herself into the cushions. Sunlight spilled across a round dining table, and there was a small balcony with a view of the park down the street. The kitchen gleamed, not from luxury, but from newness and care. What is this? Maya asked, her voice caught somewhere between suspicion and awe. Daniel shrugged lightly. A friend had a place they weren't using, thought it would suit you. She turned toward him, searching for the edges of the truth. And the rent? Handled, he said simply. For the first year, at least. Maya pressed her lips together. Daniel. He lifted a hand. From a friend, remember? No debt, no charity, just a door someone thought you might walk through. She didn't answer. She walked through the rest of the rooms instead. The 2 bedrooms, the bathroom with the deep tub, the closet already holding a folded blanket in the exact shade of green Emma loved. She found a shelf in the hallway with 3 of their napkin cranes resting in a row. Emma darted from room to room, her voice echoing, "Mom, my bed is so bouncy, and the window is huge, and there's a hook for my backpack." When Maya returned to the living room, Daniel was standing by the balcony, hands in his pockets. "The park's close," he said. "You'll like it when the trees bloom." 2 weeks passed. The apartment began to smell like Maya's cooking, and Emma's school projects started taking over the table. Daniel visited every few days, always with some excuse. A book Emma might enjoy, groceries he accidentally bought too much of, a small potted plant for the windowsill. Maya didn't send him away. She didn't ask too many questions either. The first warm Saturday of the season, Emma decided they needed a picnic. She woke Maya before sunrise to announce her plan, and by mid-morning they had a basket packed with sandwiches, fruit, and lemonade. Daniel arrived just as Maya was tucking a blanket under her arm. "You're invited," Emma informed him, tugging at his sleeve. "Actually, you're required. We need someone to carry the juice." So, he came. The park was alive with color, early blossoms shaking in the breeze, children chasing each other across the grass, dogs bounding after thrown sticks. Emma ran ahead, her hair catching the light, her laughter spilling across the open space. They chose a spot under a broad-limbed tree. Daniel spread the blanket, and Maya unpacked the food. The rhythm between them had shifted in subtle ways. No awkward fumbling over roles, no hovering over boundaries. He poured drinks without asking. She handed him a sandwich without hesitation. Emma came darting back, cheeks pink from running. "Come on, you two. There's a pond and ducks, and I think one of them winked at me." Daniel chuckled. "Ducks don't wink." "One did," Emma insisted, already pulling Maya to her feet. Maya shook her head, smiling, and followed. Daniel fell into step beside her, their shoulders almost brushing. The path curved toward the pond, the water flashing silver under the sun. "Emma's happy," Daniel said quietly. He agreed. "She's always been good at finding light." They walked a few more steps before Daniel spoke again, his tone lower now. "Maya, I need to tell you something." She glanced at him, wary. "Go on." "Want to be part of your lives," he said, the words steady but not rehearsed. "Not because I owe you anything, not because of what happened that night, but because I can't imagine not seeing you both. Because I feel like I've been walking around with only half a map, and you're the missing piece." Maya slowed, her eyes fixed ahead. "Daniel, I'm not asking for an answer now," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know it's not about obligation or charity. It's about wanting a future that has you in it." Emma's voice carried back to them from the edge of the pond. "Hurry up, the duck is winking again." Maya looked from the pond to Daniel, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip certain. They walked the rest of the way to the pond, like that, Emma's laughter leading them forward. Emma knelt by the pond's edge, her knees pressing into the grass as she tossed crumbs toward the water. The ducks gathered in a small quacking crowd, their beaks dipping and snapping. She laughed so hard she almost tipped forward, and Daniel caught her collar just in time. "Careful," he warned, though his voice held more amusement than scolding. "I'm fine," Emma grinned, brushing her hair out of her eyes. "Mom says I'm part fish anyway." Maya chuckled softly, a sound Daniel realized he wanted to hear more often. The tension that had once lined her face was softer now, though it hadn't disappeared completely. It was the kind of change that happened when someone stopped holding their breath all the time. They stayed by the pond until the crumbs ran out, then wandered back toward the blanket. Daniel carried Emma on his shoulders part of the way, her small hands gripping his hair as she pointed out shapes in the clouds. Maya trailed beside them, watching with a quiet expression Daniel couldn't quite read, but it wasn't disapproval. If anything, it was as though she was storing the moment away somewhere deep. Back at the blanket, they sprawled in the shade. Emma lay on her stomach, coloring in a small notebook she'd brought, humming to herself. Maya sipped lemonade, her bare feet stretched out toward the sun. Daniel leaned back on his hands, taking in the scene like he was trying to memorize it. "Do you ever get tired of being the serious one?" Maya asked suddenly. He glanced at her. "I didn't think I had a choice." "There's always a choice," she said, her tone light but edged with something knowing. He thought about that for a while. In his world, choices always came with strings, investments, deals, people expecting a return. This blanket in the park with a woman and a child who had asked nothing from him. It felt different. Emma suddenly sat up, holding her notebook toward them. "Look, I drew us, and the ducks, and Daniel with funny hair." Daniel laughed. "That's not funny hair, that's artistic interpretation." Maya leaned in to look, her shoulder brushing his. The sketch was clumsy but unmistakably them. 3 figures holding hands with the pond and ducks in the background. Above their heads, Emma had written, "Us." They ate the rest of the sandwiches and let the afternoon slip into the kind of golden light that made everything softer. When they finally packed up, Emma insisted on carrying the empty juice bottle, declaring herself chief recycling officer. Daniel carried the basket, Maya folded the blanket, and they walked back toward the apartment building together. At the door, Emma darted ahead to race up the stairs, leaving Daniel and Maya in the quiet of the hallway. "What I said earlier," Daniel told her, his voice low. "I don't want to step into your life and rearrange it. I just want to be in it, however you'll let me." Maya met his gaze for a long moment. "I don't know what that looks like yet," she admitted, "but I don't hate the idea." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That's a start." Inside the apartment, Emma was already pulling board games from the shelf, declaring it family game night. Daniel stayed for 2 rounds, losing spectacularly both times. Maya's laughter filled the room when he claimed the dice were rigged. When he finally stood to leave, Emma clung to his arm. "You'll come back tomorrow." He hesitated just long enough to glance at Maya. She gave a small nod. He said, ruffling Emma's hair, "I'll be back." As the door closed behind him, he realized the strange ache he'd carried for years felt lighter, as though some missing part of his life had quietly found its place. And though none of them said it out loud, all 3 knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a new kind of family.